Fatou, we met you the second International Humanitarian Law Dialogue.
Yes.
You came in much better replacement for this guy named Ocampo.
Yes.
And you added so much. And I remember you made such an impression on all of us, not only because of who you are, but just your graciousness and your passion for all of that. And I think this is for the camera, obviously, and for students who will get to know a little bit about you. But could you give us a little bit of your career arc? You know, born in Gambia, I guess, but were your parents, were they in the law business?
No. My parents were not in the law business. My dad was a civil servant. He worked for the government, but he also did some side business, like he was what do they call them now? Promoter for local traditional wrestling. So he used to bring those.
Promoter, huh?
He was a promoter, and then he also owned an arena where these traditional games took place. So and that's basically what he did. And my mom was a housewife, doing some petty trading here and there, and that's how I grew up in the Gambia, really. And then I did my primary and secondary school in the Gambia. I grew up into a big family. My father was polygam. He practiced polygamy. So I had a stepmom. We all lived together in one big compound. So I had siblings who were of the same mother and father, but also who were of same father, but different mothers. But up to this day, I admire my dad in how the family was brought up, because really we did not have that animosity and fighting, and we all grew up, happily together. Usually it is when you grow up that you know whose mother was who, who was whose mother. So, I can say that I had a very happy and supportive family. And after completing my high school in the Gambia, I then, and that is up to the sixth form. At that time, that is really where you could reach. And if you wanted to do any professional courses, you had to go out. So I was, and you could go to any Commonwealth country, because Gambia was part of the Commonwealth. So I chose to go to Nigeria, and from very early age I wanted to do law, and I went there, and that's where I did my law degree as well as my bar. And I came back to the Gambia and started practicing. I really
maritime law, right?
No, that was afterwards. After I came back for a couple of years, then I was sent to do my master's in maritime law, also sponsored by the government. Maritime law and law of the sea. That's where what I did my master's in, and finally came back. I was running the maritime desk at the time, in preparation for the government was preparing to have a maritime agency. But the passion of prosecution, which I had already demonstrated even as a very young lawyer, was still there. And the agency was not formed, so I continued doing what I was doing, prosecuting. I was every day in court and prosecuting various offenses, not petty offenses, but sometimes very serious murder trials, rape cases, treason trial, and also theft. Big cases. I remember one of the first cases that I did was with about, of course, the director of public prosecution was there, but he needed me to assist him. And it was, I think, about 16 to 17 accused persons. And midway during the trial, he asked me to continue with it, and I continued. So it was a very good experience for me. And I ended up, getting all of them convicted. in that case. So it's just been a passion for me. And after when I got back to the chambers, to the Attorney General's office, I was there, and I rose through the ranks. I was doing other things, but I was mainly doing criminal justice work. And finally, I became the Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions, because I was always working very closely with the Director of Public Prosecutions. And at some point, the position of Deputy Director, which was not existing at the office, was created by the Attorney General. Actually, Hassan Jallow was, yes, Hassan Jallow created that office, and I was the first Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions for the Gambia, a position which I occupied. And after, I think, about 4 years, then we had a change of government. The Jammeh regime came into power, and of course all those Hassan and others were no longer with us. They were asked to go. But we stayed on. Some of us, many of us actually stayed on, because we thought that the change that we had always wanted in the leadership of the country has finally come, and that we were going to have a lot of other advantages and be able to develop our country. But unfortunately, we see that eventually that president turned out into a dictator. And many people, he was just hiring and firing. It was really a regime of slash and burn. Yeah. Yes, and finally I had risen through the ranks up to the position of Attorney General and Justice Minister, after becoming also Solicitor General and Legal Secretary. But in 2000, and I think it was 2000 probably, we fell out. He wanted me to do certain things, which I said it was not it was against the law, and I was not going to do it. And then I had to pay with my position, because I stood my ground, and then he said, you have to go, so I left. And when I left, I opened my own chambers and started defense work. Actually, of course, I would do commercial work, but I did defense work as well. So, and I did a stint of that, not for very long, and I was really, for the first time, earning money. But as I said, my passion is really in prosecuting and being on this side. I say that it's perhaps just innate, and that I have always identified with victims of these crimes. I always want to see them in a better place than they are. And I think that my contribution, or my role in bringing about accountability and justice, could help them a lot. So,
okay, just stop for a second. Being a female in what is probably a Commonwealth male-dominated world, did you feel any eyes on you specifically? Kind of discrimination, if you will, or?
Well, you will always have that, and for me, that is why I always say, and I say to the young generation coming up, that they must know their stuff, that they must have the merit. They should not only expect to gain anything because they're female. First and foremost, they need to study. They need to equip themselves. That's what I always call it. To the extent that, even your male counterparts will know that you are worth your salt. So whatever they want to say or want to do, they know that you can stand soldier to soldier, even higher than them. So this is, for me, what always pushes me. And yes, of course, you will come by the odd person who would say things that you definitely know is because of your gender, that you're saying that. But for me, my gender was really the last thing I thought about. I put the work first. I said that, okay, I must be in a position to do this work and do it competently, just like them or even better. So this has always been the challenge that I put myself to.
One of the earlier international humanitarian law dialogue events, I realized after talking with Sir Desmond de Silva, Hassan Jallow separately,
yes,
and you, that the three of you, chief prosecutors of tribunals, had a moment of time together, one place in Gambia.
Absolutely.
Could you explain that because it was bizarre?
Yeah. In 1981, there was an attempted coup in the Gambia. This time, the president of the First Republic, Sir Dawda Jawara, was still in office, and the coup was aborted. And those who made the attempted coup were caught and were to be tried. In fact, in these times, you can say that perhaps this was Gambia's version of what we put together to do these trials, was maybe one of the first models of internationalized courts that you have, of hybrid courts, as we call them today, that you have, probably in the world. Yes, but definitely it was one of the very, very early ones that you had, because we had Gambian prosecutors, but we also had prosecutors coming from other parts of the Commonwealth, and especially we had someone like Desmond da Silva, who was also the chief prosecutor at the time for these cases. And Hassan Jallow, if I recall, was probably also the Attorney General or maybe the Solicitor General at the time. And so I was a registrar, a clerk of court, as we call it back home, meaning I sat in the cases. I called it's a clerk of court that we call it. I called the cases, the defendant is brought in, I announce the case, and then people sit down. And then I take notes for the judge. And so this was a time that really we did the trials with international judges, also mainly coming from the Commonwealth, but not from Gambia. We also had Gambians, so it was a mix, because we thought that for the fairness of the proceedings, it was perhaps better to try them not only by Gambians, but also by other professionals and lawyers and judges that are coming from other parts of the Commonwealth.
What was the result of, was there convictions?
Yes, indeed there were convictions. In fact, I think there were very, very important cases. Most of the ringleaders of that coup were caught and brought to trial, and it was successful trials, and mostly there were convictions. Yes.
I remember the following year at the Jackson Center, I interviewed the three of you.
Yes. Yes.
The first time ever, and people were taking notes like they had never heard of this. Right, probably the first international criminal tribunal.
Yes.
It was unbelievable.
At least after Nuremberg.
Nuremberg.
But in these current hybrid courts that we have, like the Special Court of Sierra Leone and so on, really, Gambia and what we had was probably the first.
And that's 1981.
That's 1981.
And things don't really, as far as the international criminal tribunals, till like mid-1990s.
Yes, mid-1990s and after 1994, when you have the two ad hoc tribunals later on, and then you had the Special Court of Sierra Leone, and finally you had the ICC, which is permanent.
Were you following at all from Gambia what was going on in Rome in 1996? Is that of interest to you?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, I was part of the delegation to the ICC, the negotiations. I have been in New York. I don't know, unfortunately, what happened, but I know I went to New York. I went to Dakar. But I don't know, something happened. Maybe for some reason I couldn't go to Rome. but I had attended many of the meetings of the ICC.
And your role there was as a delegate from Gambia or Commonwealth?
No, as a delegate from the Gambia.
Okay.
As a delegate from the Gambia, because as you know, at the time, we were trying to get all, countries to have a buy-in interest in creating this new international criminal court, where as independent states, sovereign independent states, we become part of this court. And that is why I used to argue when I was at the ICC that we have to remember that all of us as independent sovereign states, we went to sign and ratify the Rome Statute and become part of the ICC. It is not a treaty that we inherited from our colonial masters. Right. We signed it as independent sovereign states. So everybody, all the members of the United Nations used to attend. And also that is why you have many countries that are perhaps not gone on to the next step of ratifying, but they have signed the Rome Statute. They are not today members, but they have already signed the Rome Statute.
Interesting. So was it a difficult sell in Gambia to have a ratification, or is that just sort of a foregone conclusion that once you had the treaty, it was going to happen?
Yes, I think it was, we already, by sending delegation to the UN, to New York, to take part in the negotiations of this new International Criminal Court, there was already interest. I think at the time, Gambia was in a place where we also wanted to show that the rule of law prevails in our country, and that an institution like the International Criminal Court, it was perhaps very useful to be part of this court. And I always say that the smaller states in the ICC Assembly of States Parties are really, there is more benefit for the smaller states to be part of the court than anyone else. So even if you say that you do not have the bigger countries or the so-called big states to be part of the ICC, it is always good that a smaller state, it's protection really to be part of the ICC, to be in this umbrella where you know that you will have the protection of the court when, for instance, you are attacked by someone else, or even when these crimes are committed on your soil and you do not have the capacity to be able to investigate and prosecute them.
Your jump into the wild world of international criminal law was really through Rwanda, right? The Rwanda Tribunal?
Indeed, indeed.
How did that happen? Did you apply for that, or did somebody see your talents and say, I would like you to join us?
When I left the Ministry of Justice, I told you I opened my practice. Right. I opened my practice, and I was doing that. Then I was offered a position. I just received a letter from the UN, the tribunal that was opened in East Timor. East Timor. Yeah. I was offered the position of deputy prosecutor. Yes, of that tribunal. At the time, Chande Othman, Mr. Othman was the prosecutor of that. But for some reason or another, I was not ready to leave the Gambia, but also I think the tribunal was still struggling with, resources and personnel. Anyway, it did not happen. Right. In fact, it was already announced in the newspapers that Bensouda was leaving for East Timor. So I did not go. And it was, they asked me, because they had called to speak with me, and I said that unfortunately somehow it's not a good timing. I had just left the Ministry of Justice. I've opened my chambers, I'm settling down, and the timing was not very good. And they had asked me whether they could send on my CV to other institutions and tribunal. I said, of course. And it was sent to ICTR. Yeah, and ICTR one time called and invited me to an interview for legal advisor, and I actually accepted, and I did the interview. Very early in the morning, I was coming actually from the U.S. I remember I came to visit my kids who were here, and the day that we were leaving to go back to the Gambia, both myself and my husband, that's when 9/11 happened.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so we had to cancel our flights. You know what happened then? Canceled our flights, and I went days later. And during that travel to the Gambia, that's when I was asked whether I was called in between flights, if I could do the interview. Fortunately, they gave me time to reach home, and I did it the following morning, and I was offered the position of legal advisor, and I left, I think, in 2021, April, to go to the ICTR.
So in 2001, you went to the ICTR. Who was the chief prosecutor then?
At the time, it was still Carla Del Ponte.
Okay.
But shortly after that, the mandate of the ICTR and the ICTY were governed together. The mandate was together. So there was one prosecutor for the two tribunals. But somehow it was a time when they decided to separate, and each tribunal will have its own prosecutor. So Carla continued with ICTY, and that is when Hassan Jallow was appointed. Yes, Hassan was appointed as a prosecutor of the ICTR, and I was there when he came. Okay. I was there when he came, yeah.
Had you kept in contact with him? I mean, you're both from the same small country, which is remarkable.
Yes, we're actually in contact. I mean, we send each other messages, and we are in fact sitting on some boards together, like the Africa Group for Justice and Accountability. We are in contact. We are in contact. When I go to Gambia, I go to see him. Of course, when he's coming to London, he informs me. So, yeah, we have that relationship.
So how long were you in Rwanda then?
I was in Rwanda for about 2 years. Just for about 2 years, because in 2003, after I got there in 2001, in 2003, Steve Rapp came to Kigali, and then I think word got round about the little experience that I have, and he wanted me to be part of the trial. I think it was the media trial, the military trial they call it, in Arusha, to go in as a trial attorney. And I packed my bags and I was transferred from Kigali to Arusha. And I started in Arusha, I think in beginning of 2003 probably. And I was there the whole of 2003, 2004, up to the end of 2004, when the position of Deputy Prosecutor of the ICC came, and I was eventually elected as the Deputy Prosecutor.
What's the procedure? Ocampo was the prosecutor at the time.
Yes.
Right? And there's a position available. Do you just send a resume? I mean, how does it work?
No, actually what happens is that yes, when it's open, when the vacancy is open, indeed the prosecutor will scout around for people, but also it is open for all states parties to nominate candidates to apply. And in fact, at the time you did not even have to be nominated by your government, but I had my friends who were in Arusha with me at that time who encouraged me, you have the profile. You should apply. You know what you're doing. You're a good prosecutor. So they encouraged me, and eventually I applied. I think I applied probably a day before it closed. Yes, really. And the following day, I was driving back to my house from the tribunal a little bit late, maybe after 6 o'clock, and I got a phone call, and I was told, please hold on to speak to the prosecutor of the ICC. And I think it was the prosecutor, or it was someone who said they were working for the prosecutor. So I was asked to confirm whether I was interested in the position of the deputy prosecutor. And I said, yes, indeed, I am. And then the person said, I think this was a couple, said, are you ready for an interview? And I said, yes, thinking that, of course, a date will be set and you will. And I said, when will that be? He said, now. So I said, okay, can I get to my house? And, you know, and I was given a few minutes and I did the interview.
With Ocampo?
Yes, yes, with Ocampo. And I think he probably was sitting with some other people, but Ocampo was definitely on that. At the time, I think about almost 200 people applied for the position. So, and I think initially, maybe a few people were selected to go for the interview. Perhaps 10, I'm not sure. But all those applicants was reduced to a very small number. And we all went to The Hague. We were invited to The Hague to be interviewed by Ocampo himself, but also by senior staff who were already there. And it was after that Ocampo, as prosecutor and acting really under the rules and regulations, that he can select 3 people from those who have been interviewed and then send them as nominating them to the Assembly of States Party to be elected. One of them would be elected. So I recall that, and then you had to go through all that process of, you know, coming to New York, meeting the civil society, meeting NGOs, meeting the CICC, that is the Coalition for the International Criminal Court, being interviewed. It was a tedious process. And then you will also present to different regional groups, like Africa Group, Asia Group, European Group, all the 5 regions. You will speak to them, and then they will be represented there. The group will be represented by the permanent representatives who are in New York for their different countries of the ICC. So and after that, and we had to do that individually. You know, the 3 candidates will all go about doing that. Then finally, the 3 candidates will come together, and then they will present to the whole group, like the whole members, Assembly of States Parties, and then they will ask you questions and so on. Then after that, there will be voting during the Assembly of States Parties. So that's how it happened. And at the time that I was elected, I think maybe 120 countries, or maybe 90-something countries were present and voting. You know, I got about, I think, maybe 60-something of the votes, and the other 2 shared the remaining. You know, it was
landslide.
Yes, it was a landslide.
Yeah.
It was a landslide, and I was elected at the first round as deputy prosecutor of the court. Yeah, that's how it happened.
So it all happened while you were there?
Yes,
I mean,
because it's really like the General Assembly of the ICC.
Yeah.
So everybody was there, and you know, people were, you know, talking. Of course, there is other business that they will do, like the budget and stuff, but the elections will also be
So you
at
knew
that time.
once you got to New York,
Yeah.
by the time you left, something was going to happen.
Yes. Well, I was hopeful.
Yeah.
I was hopeful. I know I had very good meetings, and I think I presented well. And I was later told that, you know, whenever I was presenting, the passion of what I was saying was coming out. I was not doing it deliberately, but it's just, I think, how I felt about, you know, the position and the promise that has been given by the ICC, that I would have an opportunity to turn that promise into a reality by bringing justice to the victims of these atrocity crimes.
How much direction did you get from the prosecutor? I mean, you're the deputy, and do you have within the office a certain jurisdiction Are you in charge of the attorneys, prosecutors? How does that work?
Okay, at the time, what Ocampo did was that there were two deputies. There were two deputies, and the first deputy was Serge Brames. He was the deputy prosecutor for investigations.
Okay.
And I was later, I think a few months after that, I was elected as deputy prosecutor for prosecutions. So that way, you know, we were able to, you know, limit ourselves, you know, to the prosecution aspect of it, and working with the senior trial lawyers. Of course, there has to be close collaboration with those who are investigating, and we formed ourselves into teams, because there was also the third arm, which was for cooperation. You know, with ICC, you have to have cooperation. You have to really be able to get people and states to support what you were doing, because we are formed, ICC was formed without police, so the executing arm of the ICC is the police and the gendarme and others of state parties. Right. So that cooperation of asking states to assist in the logistics for investigations, because always independent investigations have to be done independently by the ICC, not done and given to us. We had to do it, but we needed to deploy, go to the ground, needed to meet witnesses, talk with them. When judges issue arrest warrants, it's the states that have to help us to arrest those persons and bring them before the ICC. So it was an important aspect that we were also able to develop a division, or have a division, establish a division that could help in opening the doors, even for investigations. You know, you go and you meet the authorities, you ask for their permission, you draw up the necessary memorandum of understanding, and then your investigators will start deploying.
So, just walk through the procedure again for the camera. If a state party, there's an allegation against another state party of a crime, how does it find its way to the International Criminal Court? Who is the complainant?
All right. You know, ICC deals with individual criminal responsibility. Okay. So it's not like it's a state against a state, you know, unless, of course, we're talking about the crime of aggression. Okay. And even the crime of aggression, there will be people most responsible who could be charged for those crimes. But it's really, ICC is about individual criminal responsibility. Yeah. And once sometimes a state will refer a situation to the ICC and say that these crimes are being committed on my territory. It is so serious, I don't have the capacity to investigate them myself. And once you are a state party to the Rome Statute, the ICC can step in and start the investigations, or not even start it right away. But in my time, you would do the preliminary examination of the situation to find out whether you have jurisdiction, temporal jurisdiction, whether you have also subject matter jurisdiction. You know, these are crimes that the ICC has to try. And then you also look into issues like gravity of the crimes. Is it grave enough to warrant the intervention of the ICC? So this is how it would. And once the preliminary examinations are over and you make findings that you really need to open investigation, until this time, there is nobody directly accused of the crimes. You're saying that you go to the judges and ask for authorization to open investigation into the situation. So it is only after investigations, when you've gathered your evidence, you've analyzed it, and you find that person X and Y are persons who really, without them, the crimes would not have been committed. You know, and because you cannot possibly charge everybody. You can't do that. ICC was not meant for that. ICC is a court that complements domestic jurisdiction. It's a court of last resort. It's not a court of first instance. So complementarity also comes into the matter, because after you find all that, one thing that you also need to make sure is that the state itself, where the crimes are being committed, are not investigating or prosecuting. Because if they are investigating or prosecuting, you have to give them the opportunity to do that. That is the principle of complementarity. But if they are not, then the ICC prosecutor can continue. And at this time, people have been identified and people have been charged. And then that's where it, then of course the challenge of arresting those individuals and bringing them before the ICC judges, bringing the charges, and the judges still have to confirm, because you go through a proceeding of confirmation of charges. Mm-hmm. Once the charges are confirmed, then you can start with a trial of those persons by bringing them into custody, detention, and then the trials will start.
The prosecutor's role in all of that, I'm just thinking internally, do you meet together as sort of an executive group to decide we're going to present this to the judges? Is that how it vets?
Well, during my time, what we did was that you will have, I had like executive members, like we called it EXCOM, Executive Committee. Yeah. But also for each situation country, we formed a team. We formed a team consisting of the trial lawyer, the investigators, there will be the deputy trial lawyers and trial lawyers themselves, and then we'll have investigators, we'll have the corporation advisors, and we form them into a team. So these are the persons that will deploy to the country once we establish that we can go there, we have cooperation, and they will collect information, collect evidence. They work on the case, towards charging someone, but always under the directives of the executive committee. Because from time to time, they come back to the executive committee and report, this is where we are, and then we give them directives. We give them directives that, and the executive committee at the time will consist of myself as the head, and the deputy prosecutor, and the heads of divisions, like investigations division head, prosecutions division head, JCCD division head, and legal advisory, like that. And so we will meet, and then they report from time to time, and the case, we continue developing and building the case and giving directives, and they're going, collecting evidence and coming back. And finally, they form, the case is formed, and I, as prosecutor, have to be completely satisfied that this case is, can stand the test of trial, can go to trial now, and supported by members of my team. We will take the next steps of bringing it for confirmation of your charges, asking for warrants of arrest to issue, and it was not always easy that warrants were executed, because that is to be done by states. So we had difficulties there, but once we are able to arrest, we bring them before the judges, and the charges are confirmed, and then the trial starts.
This is like I'm going to get credit for law school here. This is fantastic.
Yes.
Your time, well, let's back up. Ocampo has a 10-year term as the prosecutor.
9 years.
9 years.
9 years, yeah.
And then you come in a little bit later.
Yes.
As a deputy.
Yeah.
Do you have a term?
Yes.
9 years?
Yes, both the deputy prosecutor and the prosecutor are elected to serve 9-year terms.
And so I'm sorry.
Yes. So when I came in, I think Ocampo had served perhaps 1 year.
Okay.
Because I believe he came in 2002 ending, and I came in 2004.
Okay.
End of 2004. And I served until 2011. That is when Ocampo's term ended. And I was still already the deputy prosecutor. And in 2012, end of 2012, at that Assembly of States Parties, I was unanimously elected by the Assembly of States Parties as the chief prosecutor. So my term started in June of 2012.
Now, you did have to get elected. You have to go through this again, right?
Yes.
There was no automatic.
Yes, it's not automatic, but here this one also, however, was different because it was a unanimous election. I think the states spoke amongst themselves and decided that there was, no country no state party was saying we don't want Bensouda. So it became a unanimous vote.
Oh, wonderful!
It was
all elections can be like that.
That's correct. It was, but you know, I was very grateful for the confidence they have had in me to be able to make that, you know, unanimous nomination for me to serve. But I also think that the work that I had been doing as deputy to Ocampo was also speaking for itself.
Sure.
You know, I believe the commitment that I had to the institution and to my office, and to make sure that we were supposed to do, I was supposed to do what the statute required of me, what the state's parties expected of me, what the victims were looking forward to from me, that I tried as best as I could to fulfill that.
When you became the prosecutor, now you're the boss, did you have a shift in mind of sort of emphasis? Was there some thing that you did that you implemented that perhaps was a little different than your boss had?
Indeed, because I have had the advantage of working with my boss for all those years. And so when I was elected, I thought there were some things. First of all, I wanted to sit and see what we have done, you know, what needs improvement, what needed to be changed, or what needed to just be done differently. Because for me, effectiveness and efficiency also was very, very important for me. And I did the strategic plan that I made immediately after coming into office was different. Whereas maybe the strategic plan, the last one that we had, was talking about, for instance, with investigations, I decided to bring in focused investigations. You know, more focused investigations was one of the things that I thought I should change, and a few other things that I really wanted to improve on. And I did that. I would refer you to the strategic plan that I did, the first strategic plan of 2012, I think, to 2015 of the Office of the Prosecutor. You will see that several changes were made, you know, very subtle, but changes that I thought would bring about more effectiveness to what we were doing.
Who did you have to report to? Was there an annual report to the to the states? I mean, the party of states, and blank there.
The Assembly of States Parties, the Assembly of States Parties was kind of having an oversight in what the Office of the Prosecutor, what the court was doing actually. So every Assembly of States Parties, you need to bring a report of the year, what has happened, and also to lay out the plan of what you intend to do in the coming years, or in the coming year. Sometimes it was, I used to always talk about the lack of resources, because what I realized was that even if you make your plans and you bring them forward and you present it to the Committee of Budget and Finance, the CBF, and you plan to do certain cases, the budget was always not enough to do all those cases. So sometimes midway you have to change, you know, to adjust your plan that you had already set for the coming year. And I believe that up to the time I left the ICC, I kept on, you know, asking that definitely the states parties needed to look at what was happening. They needed to make sure that the resources that are needed by the office to be able to do the cases should be given to the office. And you know, I was hardly successful. I You know, there was even a point in time when the states parties talked about the zero growth, so that nothing was added to the budget. But yeah, we tried to do what we can with the resources that we had.
Did you find that they were second guessing you aside from the money aspect of it, but now it's the policy? So you're presenting your results, you're presenting what's occurred. Did the state's party simply said, hey, maybe you shouldn't have done this? Were they critical of the performance or just critical of the budget?
No, it was most of the time tied to the budget.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Because I even remember discussing with one state party who was saying that, you know, why do you have to accept all these cases that are referred to you by the UN Security Council? Because they're referring states that are not parties to the Rome Statute and contribute zero budget to the work of the ICC, and yet the Security Council refers these cases and you spend resources on them. Why don't you just reject it? Well, that's not what is in the statute. Sure. You know, the statute says that the Security Council can refer cases, situations to the ICC, as they did in Sudan and also as they did in Libya. But there were even some state parties who were saying that just reject them so that you don't have to spend any money on them, more or less telling me that, you know, you have to flout what the law says. So, and yeah, sometimes they would also criticize that it's taking too long. You know, I'm spending time on preliminary examinations. It takes too long. When criminal preliminary examinations was a part of our work, that required the least resources. The least, because it's just a question of collecting information from open sources from everywhere and analyzing that information in-house. No, but yes, they criticized the office about that. But otherwise, the work was also highly appreciated.
There was a moment where you got in the crosshairs of the United States.
Yes, yes.
And I mean, it affected us here at the, because you had to kind of beam in.
Yes.
You couldn't get a visa.
That's right.
And it was in, I remember reading this now, November of 2017, you advised the ICC to consider charges for human rights abuses committed during the war in Afghanistan, such as alleged rapes and torture by the United States Armed Forces and the CIA. And John Bolton reacted.
Yes.
Your buddy John.
Yes. Yeah.
He claimed that the ICC had no jurisdiction in the United States, which had not ratified the Rome Statute that created the ICC. However, Afghanistan did ratify the Rome Statute, and thus crimes committed on its territory by anyone, even if he or she is a citizen of a country that did not accept the ICC's legitimacy, is subject to its jurisdiction. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
And they crazy. I'm editorializing now, but they took your visa. Yes. And even froze assets.
Yes.
Did they shock you? That they had the reaction?
It was a reaction that perhaps maybe I saw coming, because all the time I think they were urging the office not to have to do anything with Afghanistan in our investigations. And under the statute, under the Rome Statute, if crimes, these kind of crimes that are under ICC's jurisdiction, are committed on the territory of a state party, which is Afghanistan, was a state party, whether those who are the alleged perpetrators are members of ICC or not, have ratified the statute or not, the ICC has jurisdiction because the crimes or the alleged crimes were committed on the territory of a state party. This is how we had jurisdiction in Afghanistan. And we spent a long time looking at the crimes, gathering information, and in the end, I went to the judges and asked to open investigations into the situation in Afghanistan. And of course, as you remember, all hell broke loose. So, and I was sanctioned together with another colleague who is in the office, Pakiso Mochochoko, I was sanctioned, my visa. First there was the executive order, of course. The executive order was more or less, sort of citing the ICC as an institution that could be sanctioned together with its officials. So this happened. I was sanctioned eventually because it did not stop me. I thought that I had to continue to do my work as I should. So I continued. I was sanctioned. I could no longer come. You remember that there were, even to report to the UN Security Council, which I had to do in the cases of Libya and Sudan separately, I could not come anymore, and I had to report on video conferencing. My account also here in the US was blocked, even though it's a UNFCU account, and but also my account in the Netherlands, because any of these banks that has its base in the United States, was bound by law to block my account. Of course, bringing great inconvenience to my work, but also the fact that I could not directly task American citizens, because otherwise the sanctions will also affect them.
Yeah.
I could no longer work with my staff who were from the US, and I had to delegate the duties and responsibilities to my deputy.
Wow.
To task them. So even the work in the office was more or less affected because of the sanctions. And we have to remember that those sanctions are meant for terrorists and people like that. It is not meant for the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court for doing her legitimate work. But this was done anyway. And I pushed the states parties. I told them that I think a red line has been crossed. Here, I'm not talking about me as Fatou Bensouda. I'm talking about me as the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, a court that you have established, you have put into being. Now, your chief prosecutor is being sanctioned because the work that the statute gives me the right and obligation and responsibility to do, I am being sanctioned for that. And I know that the states parties did a lot of work, but I also know that it had put them in very difficult situations, that they had to deal with this. I think it was perhaps an inconvenience for them, but they had to deal with it. I couldn't work this out on my own.
And ultimately,
ultimately, also civil society did a lot of work. Abila, there were even, I don't wish to perhaps mention, but there were even some who were willing to take the matter to court in the US, and you know that they did in support of lifting the sanctions. Eventually it was lifted, but it wasn't lifted during the time of Mr. Trump. It was lifted during Biden's time, when he came into office.
Oh, I didn't appreciate that. Yeah.
Yes, when he came into office, he lifted the sanctions against that were imposed on me.
It was
how long then? That was a long time.
Well, that was 2 years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Close to, about, yeah. Yeah.
Well, we missed her.
Yes.
We almost had to cancel because she didn't show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, was that tough on you? I mean, in reality, now you become a political pawn. I mean, think about it, in a sense, you were in the Time magazine, 100 most powerful people in the United States,
yes.
And due to an accusation, which you had the perfect jurisdictional right to do,
yes.
all of a sudden, the United States reacts. Well, I hate to use the term bullying, but they were bullying.
Yes. Well, I think it was unfair.
Yeah.
I really think it was unfair that these sanctions were imposed on me. I have not done anything wrong but my work. I was just doing my work. And for that I was sanctioned because maybe to the United States, I dared to look into the conduct of the CIA and other agencies of the government. It was also the time when I was looking at the situation in Palestine.
Right.
And I was also saying that I had actually gone to the trial chamber under Article 19 to ask for, some more or less a guidance, telling the judges that I've done this. Is this the way to go or not? And the judges unanimously agreed with me. Yeah. Of course, this was after the sanctions were lifted and a new government was in place. But eventually, the judges agreed with me that I was on the right path. Yeah. So I was I was not overreaching. I wanted to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to do the right thing, and always to do it without fear or favor.
Well, that is your reputation.
Yes.
That is your reputation. So ultimately, when your term is up after 9 years, and you decide, or you leave the office. I mean, say you decide to leave the office. You leave the office. Mm-hmm. Was that hard to kind of pack up and one day and say adios?
No, I mean, it's a big part of your life, that you serve in these institutions, you make friends, you establish relationships. So you have people that you work with, and you work with as a team. So definitely leaving them at the end of the mandate is it's quite hard that you are not going to be together. But I took the job with my eyes open, very clear-eyed, that I am here for a mandate of 9 years, at the end of which I have to leave. So I was not under any illusion that I may stay longer than the 9 years. It would not be in accordance with the regulations of the court. So I just prepared myself for that, but I also make sure that everything that I was supposed to do during that mandate, I had done it. Right. What I couldn't, I just left with my successor to take it up, and he will have his own style. He will run the office as but during my time, what I was supposed to do, I ensured that I do it to the fullest.
So you go home. I mean, it's one day you're done.
Yes.
Was it hard to just kind of sit in the couch one day and say, I don't have to go to work?
Well, I had intended that I would take a break. Yeah. Because I think you will appreciate that it has been a tough ride for me, especially in the last few years. So I decided that, and I was not taking any leave or time off, because the position just did not allow me to do that. So after my term ended, I took a few months, and just knowing that this is meant for me to just, relax, zen, and then move on to the next chapter of my life.
So Gambia awarded you the country's highest civilian honor for your principal service as ICC prosecutor, nominated for a 2021 Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of your accomplishments and work in advancing international criminal justice without fear or favor.
Exactly.
And Dr. Bensouda currently serves as the Gambian High Commissioner to the Court of St. James and Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to the Kingdoms of Denmark, Norway, Sweden, the Republics of Austria, Ireland, Finland, and the State of Israel, and the Vatican.
Yes.
Now, with that, that's an amazing title. Yeah. But you've had a chance, just because you showed us some pictures, just from a personal side. Yes. You have a picture of the Pope.
Yes.
Not everybody has a picture of the Pope.
Indeed. As the ambassador accredited to the Holy See, Vatican City, I have to present my letters of credentials to the Pope. Accredited by my government and my president to cover the Holy See. So I did that, and I had to present to him, and he would accept it. So this is like a formal event of showing that I am covering the Holy See. I have likewise done the same to the King of Sweden, likewise to the King of Norway as well. And of course, before doing all that, I had to present my letters to King Charles.
Wow.
Yes. So, and I'm still to present to Finland and Ireland and Austria.
You've met a tremendous amount of people, but is there sort of an awe factor in meeting the Pope?
Well, the Pope is a very important figure, as we know. And indeed, I was not in awe, but, you know, looking forward to meeting him. And I wasn't disappointed. I think he's a good man. He's a holy man. And he received me well, and we chatted about, you know, my work especially, and I presented my letters, and then I moved on.
Do you look back at all as sort of the legacy of Fatou Bensouda? I mean,
yes, indeed, and my plan is definitely to as soon as I have the time to perhaps write some like memoir of what I have done, especially in the international criminal justice field and international humanitarian law field. I definitely want to do that at some point. I guess it will be soon.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's such an honor for us, Cindy and I, to be in your orbit,
Yeah.
and really appreciate so much you spending time here.
Yes.
My son talking about Senegalese music.
Yes, indeed, it was real. Look, it has been for me quite a pleasure, and goes beyond the dialogues for me. That first I came into contact with your son, with Brent, who is my friend, and then I had the honor to meet your lovely wife, Cindy, and yourself. You've really treated me very well, and we've developed a friendship that I have great regard and respect for. As I said, it goes beyond just coming to the dialogues. Like, you remember last year when I came and Cindy wasn't here, I was a bit disappointed that she couldn't come.
Yeah.
And I am very, very happy, very happy today that I was able to see her. We spent little time together, but I do see you every year, and it's really always an honor and a pleasure that I am able to call your family my friend.
Well, we're just thrilled on all fronts. Thank you for taking time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
This is
Thank
great.
you. Thanks.